Okay, what's going on, guys? Ronan MMA back again with another video featuring the best hair in MMA YouTube by a country mile. Earlier, I did a video which was just a short rant about Dana White's new Power Slap League or whatever, and how I wish they would stop posting about it on Instagram. And I understand that it's not an unpopular opinion. Like, a lot of media members are going off about this stuff, and this is going to lead me to the subject that we are going to be talking about today. While I was scrolling through YouTube earlier, I saw a clip of Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell on the Morning Combat Show, and it triggered me beyond belief, and I want to talk about it. But before we do that, I would greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe, especially subscribe. It would be absolutely awesome of you. Please don't steal my content. Look at this hair. Don't you want to see this more? You know what I'm saying? Just do it. Come on. One time, free, lifetime subscription. Anyways, let's get into this. So, Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell were talking about the pay scale when it comes to Dana White's new Power Slap League. And Luke Thomas had mentioned that he had spoken with the guy whose name I forget once again because he's not... The media members keep calling him a UFC veteran. Like, when I think of a UFC veteran, I think of someone like Glover or, Cowboy Cerrone, because it doesn't need to be a champion. But what it does need to be is somebody who fought for the organization for a long enough period of time and had a substantial career in the UFC. I feel like that's a pretty good criteria for calling them a UFC vet. The only notable win that this guy has is Thiago Santos, and it was probably at middleweight, which is where Thiago Santos was not supposed to be. It might have even been at welterweight, right? Because Thiago Santos fought down there at one point. But essentially, Luke Thomas was saying how the pay scale, and Brian Campbell, they were both saying it was disgusting, and they weren't surprised because this is what the UFC does, and the UFC is going to do what the UFC does. And, man, this is tricky to get through because I may or may not have taken a hit off of a vape pen, which I don't usually do this early, but I am in Canada, so it's federally legal, so we're all good because that's the only good thing about our country. I am really sick and tired of this narrative that the UFC is just this evil entity that basically what they are accusing Dana White of is being some creepy warlord in a fucking movie who pays for disgusting violence just for entertainment or whatever. And Luke Thomas had this quote where he said brain damage shouldn't be this cheap. And I'm just did Luke Thomas get his brain damage for free or what happened? I know he likes to come off as an intellectual, but I'm not quite sure why somebody that was as smart as he likes to, act he is, become a journalist. I've written some things here, though, that I want to get into. So we're going to do that right now, and I'm going to try to speed things up a bit. Scott Coker, first of all, is worth an estimated $25 million. Now, obviously, that is nowhere near Dana White's astounding $500 million net worth. However, $25 million net worth is mountains and valleys away from any Bellator fighter's net worth. Scott Coker's sitting over there in Mount Doom, and his fighters are all still stuck at the Shire. I did a few quick Google searches for who Bellator's highest paid athlete was, and I've got two examples here. They both make the exact same amount, and it was the biggest amount that I could find, so we're gonna go off of that. And if I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments and let me know, because I don't want to be spreading bullshit over here. So Patricio Pitbull, who, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm not mistaking him for his brother, is one of the most dominant champions in Bellator history, and is essentially the face of Bellator. He's one of their biggest stars. I'm pretty sure he just recently had a title defense as well, and for that title defense, he made an astounding $150,000. That's right, a flat rate fee. That's it. Show money. No win bonus included at all. Okay? 150 grand for a world championship fight in probably the second most talent rich MMA organization. I don't know, maybe ONE FC's got them beat, maybe PFL's getting up there. I don't know, but they're close. There's if they're not second, they're very close to second. They're all. I feel like all those corporations are kind of like close together when it comes to talent. Bro, there are women champions that make $400,000 to $500,000 in the UFC. One's like fucking Carla Esparza, who put on an absolute bullshit performance, and yeah, Rose was horrible as well. The belt should have been vacant as of then, in my opinion. That was a horrible fight. Carla Esparza in her next fight probably made around $400,000 to $500,000 because that's like the lowest salary for a UFC champion. There are guys in the UFC whom have never held a belt that make double that. And Yoel Romero just left the UFC, right? They didn't want to re-sign him. He went to Bellator. The narrative keeps getting pushed out that the reason these fighters are not re-signing with the UFC is because they would rather go make more money here. That is not the majority of cases. You've got there's a few examples that you could come up with, or that I could come up with, at least off the top of my head right now. Corey Anderson, Anthony Pettis, guys like that who may, be making more than they did at the UFC. Sergio Pettis, fine. In Yoel Romero's fight against Israel Adesanya, which I understand that pay is not based off of performance, like the contract is signed beforehand, right? He made a $350,000 base salary for that fight, whereas Izzy made over $1 million base pay, and then on top of that gets his pay-per-view points. So, again, the narrative that fighters are going to Bellator and the PFL to get paid more, in my opinion, is nonsense and is mostly, a few exceptions, not the majority. Does anybody honestly think that if Bellator was in the UFC's position, Scott Coker would not be worth $500 million? Okay, that's the other thing, right? Because Bellator's got a deal with Showtime, and Luke Thomas is signed by Showtime. I want to know why, and it's because I'm sure of that. The fact that they're both involved with Showtime, but why does Luke Thomas or Ariel Helwani or any of these guys that are constantly hounding on Dana White about pay and all this shit not go after guys like Scott Coker, right? Because Scott Coker is in the position where he could do the quote-unquote moral thing and pay these guys more money, right? They claim, Bellator, that is, they claim that they pay 44.7% of their yearly revenue to fighters, right, to fighter pay. In 2020, not 2021, in 2020, which was probably not the best year for Bellator. They've probably had better years since. Their revenue was over $100 million. I don't know how many fighters they have on their roster. But $150,000 for your champion is fucking criminal, if you ask me. And there is no champion in the UFC that makes even close to that. So based on the few highest salaries that I've looked up, I would probably say that number is bullshit. And the issue is that with the UFC, they've had that ongoing court case with, I think it was a class action suit. I think it involved Gray Maynard and maybe Mark Hunt got in. I don't know. A few guys, but point is, all of their numbers are public, right? I went and looked up just before I started this how many fighters are on the UFC roster. I got a number immediately, as soon as I Googled it. It was literally the top thing as of 2023, 578 fighters contracted to the UFC. I tried to look up the same thing for Bellator. I do not get an answer. Okay, I cannot. I just don't understand why these journalists don't go after these other guys. Because Ariel Helwani's not signed with Showtime, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But, and maybe Scott Coker at Bellator, maybe they factor in an average amount that they're allowed to make with sponsors that get put into all of that. And look, I'm not trying to say that, well, firstly, the UFC, it's been shown that they pay about 20% of their revenue to their fighters. So if that is true, the 44.7%, like, Jesus Christ, I don't understand how you're paying your champion $150,000 and Luke Thomas isn't fucking shitting all over you for it. How is that not occurring? Okay. And you know what? Full disclosure, I've kind of got an issue with Luke Thomas, or not an issue, but an issue. I used to watch him because if you're an MMA fan or a hardcore MMA fan, you've probably watched like one of Luke Thomas's, analyst videos that he does where he breaks down shit in a way that a lot of MMA content creators don't do. Like, he gets right down into the weeds, right? So I used to watch him about 3 years ago. And then the thing happened where the world shut down and all that jazz. And I just remember how hard he went on people who wouldn't get the squirt, right? I'm going to call it that because I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube. You're looking at somebody right now who did not get the squirt, okay? And to this day, I still have not got the thing that the squirt was meant for, right? So he went extremely hard on people who did not want to be part of an experiment. I'm sorry if that offends anybody, but that is basically what it was. We've now, I just saw an article yesterday where the UK has banned it, the squirt boost for anybody under 50, which means that all along, you guys, if you were one of the people like Luke Thomas, were being absolute assholes for all the wrong reasons, and you were incorrect. And what I remember most about it is that he literally was bragging on his own fucking live chat show about how he went on a whole tangent about people that don't want to get it. And then somebody in his chat had said something about Michael Chandler. And I talked to Michael Chandler. He said, I talked to Michael Chandler, and he says that he just wants to wait and see, and blah, blah, all this. He was basically, that's what he sounds like, by the way. He could plug his nose. It would sound the exact same. Now my nose is a little stuck together inside. He was basically bragging about how he peer pressured Michael Chandler into promising to Luke Thomas that he would get the squirt. And I don't know, people probably know this. Michael Chandler is extremely religious, and he takes it quite seriously. So whatever your opinion on that subject might be, I don't think that anybody should be pressuring anybody into doing anything with their body that way. I think that's totally fucking wrong, and Luke Thomas is a cuck, and I hope his wife's boyfriend treats him nice. But, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Luke Thomas fans that see this. Well, not a lot, because not a lot of people watch my videos that hate me now, but that is totally fucking fine. The other thing that Luke Thomas does that I have a serious goddamn problem with is he infantilizes these fighters so badly to the point where he strips them of all agency, and he essentially he's treating them like they are retarded children. Okay? That's what he's doing. Because when he's going on about those slap dummies, right? The dudes that are slapping men for a living, which is probably the easiest profession in the world, except the fact that you got to get slapped back. I just don't understand, though. How fucking much do you want them to get paid? Like, answer that question. How fucking much do you want them to get paid? Because let's not even look at the shitty contracts that the UFC offers for a beginning contract, because that's what everybody goes to, right? They were talking about, these guys, 2-2, if they win 3 fights, they could make potentially $12,000 throughout the night. Okay. Which is a starting UFC contract, right? 12-12. That's usually the number that gets thrown around. So their point was, well, if you raise these guys' pay, you're kind of in a predicament where how are you going to justify them, blah, 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 blah. I want to ask you this, fucking Luke Thomas or Brian Campbell. How the fuck do you justify Scott Coker paying his champion $150,000 when these guys slapping each other, these fucking brain daddies slapping each other on stage, have the potential to make almost 1/10 of what that MMA world champion is making under the Bellator banner at Showtime, and they have trained their decades, at least for what they have achieved. So take Dana White out of it. How are you going to justify the fact that Dana White is paying these slap guys, a tenth, which sounds like a small amount, but if you really think about it, dude, the amount of work that Patricio Pitbull has to put in to be where he's at over the years and presently, like whatever the fuck, I just said the same word twice. I pulled a Michael Bisping, dude. I just basically used a thesaurus there. I don't know what happened, but how do you justify that? Pitbull's fighting another trained fighter for $150,000 fucking dollars, and he's the world champion. And Dana White's paying these dummies who win this slap contest $12,000, bro. It's fucking insane to me that these guys will go after Dana White nonstop in the UFC when they're working for guys that do something like this. Like Luke Thomas, first of all, absolute fucking hypocrite. I don't care what anybody says. Y'all can hate me if you want. If you're a Luke Thomas fan, that's fine. That's fine, dude. But the reality is that if the UFC was not doing as well as they were doing, Luke Thomas doesn't have a fucking job. There's a reason, dude. Luke Thomas works for Showtime. We've gone over this. I've said this a few times now because I'm scattered. They've got an MMA promotion that they work with. Why is it that the view count on your videos are always, you guys talk about UFC more, maybe the same, if not more, than you do the MMA promotion that is directly linked to the company that you work with. And the reason is because the UFC gets you the views. Right? The UFC makes your money. You would be nobody if there was no UFC. Which means, Luke Thomas, if Dana White did not exist, nobody would know your fucking name. Okay? Like, these guys who act like they're champions of fighter pay should be calling this shit out. Right? Another guy, Chaudhry, right? At 1FC. That dude's worth $350 million. Unless your name's fucking Mighty Mouse, or like Gordon Ryan, or Nicky Holtzkin, or some dude who had a name prior, which, by the way, are the only guys that get real money at Bellator as well. I don't even remember what the fuck I was saying, but Jesus Christ, man. I had a good point, and it just went away. You know, that happens sometimes. Yeah, Chaudhry, worth $350 million. In fairness, Luke Thomas has talked some shit about Chaudhry before. But then I'm going to call him out again because the amount of times that he's called out Dana White does not even come close to the amount of times he's called out Chaudhry. And Chaudhry and Dana, in terms of net worth, they're not that far apart in the grand scheme of things, right? Chaudhry's rich as fuck. That's the point. Scott Coker is also rich as fuck, and these guys don't call it out. They just kept saying they weren't surprised the UFC is going to do what the UFC does, right? Like, Jesus Christ. It is insane to me. Here's the thing, too. Okay? These idiots, again, back to the infantilizing. These guys are full-grown men that have decided they want to bitch slap other men as a profession. How much do you want them to get paid? I don't how much do you want them to get paid? They know what they're doing. They know what they're signing up for. It's the same with the fighters. Dude, the UFC's numbers are all public. The fighters know what the starting contract is. If you're a 16-year-old kid and you're training in mixed martial arts, you know that you need to, you've got a long way to go before you're like some rich and famous guy. You don't just make it to the professional leagues like the UFC or whatever, and you're immediately a millionaire. And people still know that. Right? Or they know that, pardon me, and they still do it. So, you know, these guys, to me, are getting up there with Big John and Josh Thompson, and I love John McCarthy, but I seriously do have a problem with the way that they shill for Bellator while shitting on the UFC at the same time. And I get that the UFC is the big guy, right? But again, their YouTube channel wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the UFC. They like, nobody would watch them if they only covered Bellator events. Sorry, that's the truth. I'm not trying to be a douchebag, right? But the exposure that these slap dummies would get just from being associated being associated with something that Dana White is associated with, the social media exposure that they will be able to get, which then creates monetary potential for them on their social media accounts, is bigger than people give it credit for. You know what I mean? It's goddamn, dude. I criticize the shit out of Power Slap. I fucking hate Power Slap. I think it's the dumbest shit ever. But the way that these guys criticize, for all the wrong reasons, man. And I want to just compare one thing before I go. Patricio Pitbull, if I'm still not mistaking him for his brother, I could be. Somebody let me know. Is like the face of Bellator, dominant champion. I believe he's the featherweight champion. I could be wrong. But let's just say he is, for sake of argument, because I won't compare him to a larger weight class fighter, because a lot of the times heavyweights and, you know, guys like that, they'll get paid a bit more because casual fans are more interested in watching bigger dudes fight. It is what it is. I don't know why, but, you know, Alexander Volkanovski, in his last fight against Max Holloway, his base pay was around $780,000 disclosed. And disclosed means that does not include the amount of money he made from pay-per-views. So he probably walked away with at least a $2 million payday. Now compare that to Patricio Pitbull, who's getting paid $150,000 from Bellator with no pay-per-view points, because they don't do the pay-per-view model, and whatever he makes from sponsors. Now, are you going to tell me that Patricio Pitbull makes, you know, over $1.5 million for one fight in sponsor money? I highly doubt that. So I understand the argument for the whole fighter pay thing, right? And especially back in 2005, when the fighters were receiving a 10% cut of the revenue. That is fucked beyond belief, right? I'm not trying to be a Dana White simp over here. What I'm trying to do is expose the fact that all of these media members who do, whether they'll say it or not, have a strong political bias, and a lot of them hate Dana White, not just because of his business ethics, but also because of his politics, right? He was a Trump guy. I don't know if that word gets you in trouble either, but I don't know. And Luke Thomas is like a full-blown like socialist, essentially. I don't know. That might be a slight exaggeration, but he's always shitting on like normal business practice, and I'm like, you fucking work for a guy. Well, you guys, if he wanted to make a stand, stop covering MMA until they change shit, and that includes Bellator. Period. So yeah, Power Slap's dumb, right? So are Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell, because they're criticizing it for all the wrong reasons, and they're making me jump on here and defending this shit. How much do you want them to get paid? 1/10 of what your Bellator champs make? Sounds good. Maybe you should talk to Scott Coker about that one there, eh, guy? I mean, all these dudes are fucking rich hyper-capitalists in this to make money, and I'm glad that they are, because the sport is like one of my favorite things on earth. So those are my thoughts on this. Luke Thomas can watch his wife get fucked. I don't care. And if that makes anybody mad, I'm sorry. Let me know. Dislike or comment. Talk shit. I don't care. Go give her, bro. All right. Well, like and subscribe. See ya.